Ilen Sila Lumen Omentielvo. Today I will be discussing the nature of the Orcs in Middle-earth. Orcs are the ultimate foot soldiers of evil in Middle-earth. But this raises some questions about their nature. What were they? How did they come to be? Could there be good orcs? These are questions that Tolkien himself struggled with over his time of writing. Let's first look at the origins of orcs. There are different versions to how the orcs were created. The first is mentioned in the Book of Lost Tales, in the Fall of Gondolin section of that book. In it, the orcs were in fact made from stone and some mixture of heated slime, fueled by rage from Melko, the earliest name for Morgoth. The next rendition is one of the darkest ideas in Middle-earth. This is that after the awakening of the elves, Morgoth captured some and corrupted them into the orcs in order to mock the creations of Eru Ilúvatar. They would be tortured and mutilated, bearing little resemblance to the elves they had once been. Another telling of the tale is that Morgoth, instead of corrupting the elves, did so to men, inflicting upon them the torture and transformation into the orc. The last version I will mention is the idea that Morgoth corrupted some creature into the orcs. Of all of these versions, the most likely origin for the orcs is the elven story, for various reasons, as Morgoth does not have the power to create, and therefore can only corrupt, which would eliminate the first story. The first appearance of orcs comes during the Years of the Trees, and while Tolkien wrote about the idea of men having awoken during that time, the Silmarillion has men awakening during the first rising of the sun. But if the orcs were corrupted elves, is there a way for an orc to be purified and return to being an elf? This very idea seemed to trouble Tolkien the most, and is one of the reasons he wrote a different origin. My first instinct would be to say no, an orc could not become an elf again, as that would throw into question the act of killing an orc. In Tolkien's writings, any wars and conflicts between the free peoples is seen as evil. The kinslayings, the strife between dwarves and elves, the various wars of men. But this is never depicted with wars between orcs. From that perspective, one could assume that the orcs had no redemption available. That conflicted heavily with Tolkien's faith, which was a fundamental aspect to the world building of Middle-earth. So the answer would be that orcs had no free will, and yet there are still some questions that aren't addressed with this idea. The main one being the conversation between Shagrat and Gorbog in the Two Towers. Here we see two orcs having a full dialogue with each other, discussing matters such as the war and even about deserting the army. If the orcs were just fully under Sauron's control, they had no free will, the very idea of desertion could not enter their minds, which seems to indicate some matter of free will, which requires a soul. And that is the conundrum that Tolkien was never able to solve. But there are a variety of theories out there that attempt to solve this problem. To solve the issue of orcs having free will, and yet being irredeemable, there could be a situation where the elves were tortured so badly that the elven spirit left the body. Elves are stated to be able to leave their bodies during intense duress and suffering, which would have to apply to the process of turning into orcs. So there is this orc body that is now soulless. But what would happen next? One idea would be that evil spirits inhabited the original orc bodies. We know that creatures such as werewolves were creatures that had evil spirits enter them and make them more powerful. This could be what happened to the orcs. Elven spirit leaves the deformed body, a new evil spirit is summoned by Morgoth and enters the body and becomes the first orc. Not every orc, however, would be created by tortured elves, as it is said that later orcs were created in the fashion of the children of Ilúvatar, meaning they would have produced in a similar manner. So only the original orcs would have these evil spirits inside of them. That does seem to correlate to the idea of the werewolves as well that I mentioned earlier, as Carcharoth, the greatest of the werewolves, while he seems to have a greater spirit than, say, what a regular wolf would have had, it is not an evil spirit that was taken and placed inside of him. It seemed more that he was born of that. So only the original orcs would have these evil spirits inside of them. That would solve the issue of free wills in the orcs while still having them be completely evil. Another possibility is still that the elven spirit departed, but that Morgoth and Sauron controlled the orcs like drones or robots. They can still think and act somewhat independently, but require the wills of their masters in order to properly function. This kind of seems to be the idea at the end of the War of the Ring. When Sauron is defeated, the orcs seemingly go mad because they do not have the will of their master to control them anymore. The only problem is that this doesn't get us around the free will issue, as again, Shagrat and Gorbog discuss desertion, which would certainly not be in the will of their master Sauron. Now for the last theory I would like to present is my own. Once more, the elven spirit would depart the body. I don't think the elves could possibly survive the torture. However, instead of an evil spirit or drone-like obedience, I think that Morgoth poured the very essence of evil into the orcs. Think of it almost similarly to how Sauron poured his malice, his evilness, into the One Ring. I think Morgoth might have done something similar to the orcs. Orcs would then have the characteristics of evil creatures. They could be irredeemable and yet still have some semblance of a free will. In terms of the Shagrat and Gorbog's discussion, a being created out of the characteristics of pure evil would be able to betray their master due to betrayal being a part of the nature of evil. They can hate Sauron and still serve him and still think of betrayal. They can kill and destroy because that is what evil does. The free peoples can fight the orcs and not be distraught by it because what they are fighting against is the embodiment of evil. But that's just my theory, so let me know what you think of it in the comments below. If you disagree, let me know what you think about the nature of orcs. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, feel free to like and subscribe for more content. Please let me know how I can better improve these videos. Thanks, and as the elves say, Namaste.